Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians
That's right.
as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
you can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewbs, and this is Dewbs and Co, the best debate show in town. That's what I reckon it is. Coming up tonight, Nicola Sturgeon has resigned. Did that shock you, by the way? Did you see it coming or not? And what do you make to the news? Are you someone that's saying, yes, good riddance when it happens? Or do you think actually it's all a shame? Your thoughts? What next as well for Scotland, Britain, independence? And what about the top jobs for women? Can they hack it or not? And in Wales, they've scrapped pretty much all of their major road projects. Why? To protect the environment. It's been called a brave move by some. I can tell you now, it's been called much worse things by others. Do you agree with it, or do you just think it's all a bit much and a war on cars? And do you agree with the following statement? Are you ready? The world is controlled by a secretive elite. Yes or no? Many people do indeed agree with that statement. What does it mean? Who are these elites and what are they up to? And when it comes to asylum seekers, red wall areas are housing 7 times as many asylum seekers per person as the southeast of England. Why? Is that fair? Doesn't sound it to me. What about you? We'll get into all of that, but first up, let's bring ourselves up to speed, shall we, with tonight's latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, within the last few minutes, you'll reflect on that breaking news that has just come to us at GB News, that Lancashire Police have made a statement about the missing mum of 2, Nicola Bulley. They're saying she had a history of significant issues with alcohol, which they say was brought on by her ongoing struggles with the menopause. They also said officers attended her property on the 10th of January over a concern for welfare. They're not saying for whose welfare, but they are saying no one was arrested in relation to that incident, but investigations continue. And of course, detectives are continuing to say that Nicola was listed as a high-risk missing person due to a number of specific vulnerabilities. Earlier on, they refused to disclose those vulnerabilities, but it certainly seemed in the last hour that a couple more details have now come out from Lancashire Police. Well, speaking earlier at a news conference, they said there's still no evidence to indicate a criminal aspect or a third-party involvement in the missing case of Nicola Bulley. The 45-year-old has been missing now for 19 days. We'll bring you more on that, of course, throughout our evening of news here on GB News. Well, also our top story today on GB News, Rishi Sunak has been speaking about Nicola Sturgeon and thanking her for her service. After the First Minister made a surprise announcement, she's to step down after 8 years in power. Ms Sturgeon said she was proud to have been the first female and longest-serving First Minister of Scotland. She'll remain in her role until her successor is appointed. Ms Sturgeon acknowledged that the move might seem sudden, but denied it was due to short-term pressures and said she'd been wrestling with the idea for some weeks.
To those who do feel shocked, disappointed, perhaps even a bit angry with me, please know that while hard, and be in no doubt, this is really hard for me, my decision comes from a place of duty and of love. Tough love, perhaps, but love nevertheless for my party and above all for the country.
Well, let's get reaction to that now and take you live to Holyrood, where our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is standing by for us. And how has this news been received where you are, Darren?
I think it has come as a shock, not just here in Scotland, but right across the UK. You only have to look at the messages that Nicola Sturgeon has been receiving from different party political leaders to realise that, Polly. This has come as a surprise, but maybe when you dig down, the signs were there, not least of all on this big constitutional question of independence. The SNP at the moment seem boxed in, not really having an avenue to have a second referendum with Supreme Court and the UK government those paths, but also big questions about the SNP's record in government when it comes to health and education here in Scotland too. But be in no doubt this will be a significant blow, not just to the SNP, but indeed independence movement here in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon has been a very effective leader and campaigner for that independence movement, and despite her protestations today, Polly, I would suggest that actually some of the events in recent weeks, particularly around the gender recognition bill and the fallout from that, must have weighed heavily on Nicola Sturgeon. And while it may not have been the cause, I think it has expedited that decision for her to call it a day.
Darren McCaffrey, thanks very much indeed. Now, the Labour leader has apologised on behalf of his party for the handling of anti-Semitism complaints under his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn. So Keir Starmer said today he confirmed Mr Corbyn won't be standing for Labour at the next general election. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission announced it'll end its monitoring of the party 2 years after finding it responsible for unlawful harassment and discrimination. So Keir Starmer said action, not just an apology, was needed.
To all those who were hurt, to all those who were let down, to all those driven out of our party who no longer felt it was their home, who suffered the most appalling abuse. Today, on behalf of the entire Labour Party, I say sorry. What you've been through can never be undone. Apologies alone cannot make it right.
Union leaders have said further strikes by teachers will go ahead after disappointing talks with the Education Secretary. The General Secretary of the National Education Union, Kevin Courtney, said nothing had persuaded those around the negotiating table to stop strike action, which is planned for next week.
Parents know that their children's education is being disrupted every day, and our action has a higher moral purpose, that we are trying to get the government to invest in this generation of children, not just tell us they'll invest in a generation of children in the future. They need to invest in the kids in the schools now in order to help improve their education.
Kevin Courtney. That's all from me for now. I'm back in an hour. Let's get more now from Michelle in Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening, and alongside me, I've got Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group, and Joe Phillips, the political commentator and former advisor to the Lib Dems. Good evening.
Hello.
Reunited, you two. Very happy about that. And it's amazing what you found out in the break, everyone, because I've just discovered that these two are keeping me company in Doncaster. March the 15th. Are you coming along? Budget Day. We'll be getting to grips with the announcements. Do you reckon they'll be interesting, those announcements?
Well, it'll be interesting to see if we've got any prospect of economic recovery, won't it?
It'll be interesting to see if there's any tax cuts in there as well. The pressure is on. Somehow, though, I'm not optimistic. I doubt it very much. Anyway, get your tickets if you haven't already. But coming up tonight, there's a lot that I want to get into with you. Nicola Sturgeon, resignation being announced. What do you make to that? Dividing opinion, I can tell you that one. And do you think this world is controlled by a secretive elite? Yes? If so, who are they? What are their plans? What is their agenda? Your thoughts on that? And Wales banning so many major road projects now because of net zero. It's been called world-beating and brave. It's been called stupid as well, and many other things by other people. Where do you stand on it? And asylum seekers disproportionately in the red wall, particularly up north. What do you make to that? Is it fair? I certainly think not, but what says you? By the way, that Nicola Bulley story that we just had in the bulletin, such a strange story, and I feel so sorry for her little girls. Now the police have had to come out and tell us about these alcohol issues, and it's a bit...
It's
not
awful,
nice.
And I think, you know, nobody watching and following this can feel anything other than absolute heartfelt sympathy for her family, her sister, the children, her partner, and everybody who knew her. But I'm afraid, as Peter, the former detective who was on Patrick's Christian earlier, was saying, you know, the police have got themselves to blame for a lot of this. They haven't closed down the social media speculation. They said today she'd got vulnerabilities. We're not going to go into them. And then, you know, several hours later, they reveal exactly what those vulnerabilities are. And I think, you know, if there's been too much speculation, there's been too many people trying to be, you know, amateur sleuths, it is obviously a huge tragedy, whatever the outcome is, and the build-up to whatever has happened. But I think the police have not handled it very well.
Yeah, we are a nation now, aren't we, of kind of armchair experts on absolutely everything, courtesy as well of social media, Ben.
It is, and I suppose this is an opinion-based programme, so we're going to espouse an opinion. But, I mean, I think with Nicola Bulley, I mean, I've been watching it slightly circumspectly, wondering, really, is this a national issue? As you say, it's tragic for her family, for her little girls. But if it transpires that this is an accident or, you know, she took her own life, or, I mean, I don't want to speculate.
Yeah, let's not speculate.
Yeah, whatever, you know, whatever happened, this didn't merit all that speculation by the police, national media and everything else. And all that it served to do, if that transpires to be the case, is to make things worse for the family.
Absolutely. Yeah, goodness knows what the case is. It's such a peculiar story, but I can't help. I just feel so sorry for these little girls. She's got 2 daughters, and apparently they were asking the other day, is Mummy famous? I mean, how do we even answer
and
that?
You can imagine ghastly people, you know, trolls and people... Tourists, you know.
And I also, as well, I do feel a bit bad because there are so many people that have got missing relatives and they have no idea where these relatives have gone, and I wonder how do they feel when they see the resources, etc., going into this case and perhaps not into the cases of their relatives. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Richard, I like you. You've just said, Michelle, you've just described your show as the best debate show in town. You're underselling yourself. It's the best debate show on TV, period.
We love Richard.
Yeah, we do. Richard is my brother. He's not. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Is he in Doncaster?
No, but if you are in Doncaster, get yourself to it. Well, in fact, travel there. Why not? It's a good night out. You'll have me, you'll have Farage. It'll be good. Marlene says, I agree with you, Michelle. The best debate show ever. Keep it up. That's my new description of my show. It's the best debate show on TV. That's what I think, and that's what I'm going to start referring to it as. Anyway, let's get into one of those debates, shall we? Nicola Sturgeon, she has resigned. Have you seen it today? I have to say, it shocked me a little bit. I wasn't expecting it. Many people have been calling for it for quite some time, but so what? Often those things don't happen. Anyway, Ben Habib, first and foremost, were you shocked by the news today?
I was surprised. I mean, I think as recently as 10 days ago, she said she had more in the tank. And here she is 10 days later going. And you wonder whether there's something behind it about which we're not yet aware, you know, whether there's some detail or some scandal. And, you know, the SNP is not without its scandals, is it? You know, Alex Salmond had a cloud over him for a while, and investigations going on, and I think there's some queries over £600,000 gone missing from party funds or something. You know, so there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on with the SNP. And we're going to discuss conspiracy theories later.
We are,
But you just wonder whether there was a trigger point. I don't think it was a transgender issue. she's quite capable and thick-skinned enough and robust enough to have taken that mistake of hers in her stride. I don't think that would be big enough to topple a politician of her standing. And by the way, she is a first-class politician.
Absolutely.
Whatever you think of her policies and, you know, the way she conducts herself, she is a first-class communicator and politician. So I don't.
Well, she's saying she'll remain as an MSP. She's just stepping down as First Minister.
Yeah,
right?
but there's something there, isn't there, which we're not aware of.
Well, there was something alluded to earlier, that she'd been to the funeral of a long-time SNP...
Yeah, the day before.
Yes, worker, or... But anyway, certainly a colleague. I don't think it was an MSP, but somebody who she'd worked with very closely. And it might have been that, you know, that was the sort of thing that makes you realise that life is very short. I mean, there is a wonderful word, a Scottish word, called scunnered, which has been doing the rounds, which basically means you've had it up to here, you're exhausted, you've run out of fuel. I mean, I was terribly surprised, but it had echoes of Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Premier's.
That's exactly what I thought when I was watching.
I mean,
her
it was
speech
almost
today.
word for word. And, you know, actually, I think it's rather brave, if that is the case, to say, I can't do it anymore, I can't do it as well as I want to. And I completely agree with Bren. I think Nicola Sturgeon has been an outstanding politician. She's been massive in Scotland. And whatever you think of her policies, whatever you think of the SNP, she has been an inspiration to many, many women and girls to go into public life. And I think, you know, she's always behaved with great dignity and grace.
And do you think this whole kind of self-reflection, you know what, maybe I've reached the end of the line, whatever, my heart's not in it, because I thought about Jacinda Ardern as well. Is it a female, I'm going to be really blunt, can females just not hack it in the top jobs?
No, I think women are much bolder in saying, it's time for me to go, whereas I think men will go on. And, you know, we see it at the moment with this worn-out government that we've got here, the Westminster government. They're all exhausted, they've run out of ideas, they've come up with Lee Anderson as, you know, the next best thing to slice bread. I think women are willing to say, I'm not able to do this to the best of my abilities, and I think it's time for someone else to take over. I mean, I have to say that I think the whole gender recognition thing and the Supreme Court knockback will have had a huge impact. So, you know, what are you...
I think the Supreme Court, bigger impact than the transgender thing.
But I think...
You know, that really pulled the rug out from under her feet.
Yes, it did, because then what are you going into the elections, you know, which aren't that very far away, what are you going to fight on? Because, you know, education and health are not doing brilliantly in Scotland. But I think, you know, her record and her legacy will be fantastic. I should imagine this is probably very good news for Labour in Scotland. What effect it has on the Conservative Party?
Jo says her legacy.
Yeah, I disagree about the legacy. I think the legacy is awful.
Yeah,
I think she's a fantastic politician, but the legacy is awful. I mean...
But as a voice for Scotland, Ben?
But as a voice for what kind of Scotland? You know, on the one hand, she talks about this need for independence and, you know, obviously that's her principal policy aim. But she's not truthful about it, is she? Because she's not actually going to deliver independence. What she's going to do is take Scotland out of the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and insert it straight into the European Union. That's the aim.
Well,
and it's not born out of a desire for a proud, independent Scotland, which, by the way, I think could easily be an economic success. You know, people always trash the prospect of an independent Scotland based on economics, and I wouldn't go there. The idea that 5 million Scots determined to make a success of themselves would fail to do so is, I think, a flawed concept and an insult to the Scottish people.
Yes, I agree with you.
But do I want Scotland leaving the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? I do not. Do I think they have a much brighter future in the United Kingdom? I do. You know, we have cultural, historic ties. And so I think she's been damaging, actually, for the fabric of the country. She's been damaging at a fundamental economic level in Scotland. Education, health...
Well, education and health, as I just mentioned, you know, are suffering very badly. But, you know, there are things that she has done. You know, she's been really good on the environment, and she was brilliant during COVID. She was very clear. She had great empathy, again, very much like Jacinda Ardern. and explained what was
totally
going on.
pro-lockdown.
Lots of people have been getting in touch, by the way, that are in Scotland. Brian says, as a proud Scotsman, I am delighted she is going. She has been the most divisive politician since Margaret Thatcher. That says Brian. Ian says, as a Scottish resident, I am delighted she's gone, just slightly apprehensive as to which incompetent SNP loser will be her successor. That's Ian's wedding. I'm going to pick that point up in a second. Who's this? Louise says, I didn't see her resignation coming, but I'm absolutely delighted that she has. Maybe now we will have a decent leader who will place more importance in running Scotland. Cyril says, this is the best news I've heard in a long, long time. Hip, hip, hooray. Sort out our work members and get Brexit done. Right, who's going to be the next leader then, the next First Minister?
I would guess John Swinney.
Yeah, who do you think?
I haven't got a clue. I just do not know what lies behind Nicola Sturgeon. I think one of the drawbacks of having such a strong leader is that you tend to smother the possibility in, growing a number two, a natural number two.
But of course, she was number two to Alex Salmond for such a long time, and there was a great, charismatic, great
and
orator.
she absolutely rose to it.
And she rose to it. I mean, that's in a way what I mean about her legacy as a politician on the world stage.
Yeah.
She.
But I would also say, by the way, without wishing to digress, Boris Johnson is arguably one of the greatest politicians of all time. But I think he was also one of the worst prime ministers of all time. And they're not, governing.
Oh, you'll offend a lot of my viewers.
I know. Sorry about that, viewers.
You're like the housewife's favourite, and you've got to be careful because you might lose that title.
No, but the reason people like Boris is because he can communicate across social stratas,
yes, I know, but that's
across
fine.
all sectors.
That's fine if you want an after-dinner speaker, not
But
run the country.
that's the category into which I would put Nicola Sturgeon.
He's a liar.
I would say Nicola Sturgeon is a phenomenal debater. She's fantastic at getting her point across, but she's very, very short on governance. And, as we've seen, with Scotland.
If you are in Scotland, by the way, because lots of you getting in touch saying, thank goodness that she's gone, 2 questions for you. Firstly, is there anyone in Scotland that's sad today, that thinks that this is a very sad day for your country? And irrespective of where you stand on the issue, who do you want to see as your next
And can I add another question? If they're SNP voters...
What's my job?
No, I don't. If they're SNP voters, would they still carry on voting SNP now that Nicola Sturgeon stepped down?
Because if not, then who?
Yeah,
If not the SNP, then who would get your vote next time round? Give me your thoughts. A quick reminder, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. Right, quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts on that topic. But get this right, over in Wales, they've scrapped pretty much every major new road project in the country. Why? I'll give you one guess, and I bet you can figure it out. It's 2 words, starts in N, second word starts in Z. Yeah? Do you get it? It's been called world-beating and brave. I think personally it's absolutely ridiculous. Where do you stand on it? Give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib keeps me company also, former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group, and Joe Phillips, a political commentator and former advisor to the Lib Dems. I spent a lot of time saying how loved Ben Habib is on this show. Also, though, Joe Phillips, you're fabulous as well.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Isn't she?
She is.
Yes.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
And what I also like as well is the respectful debate between you two. You are one of my favourite pairings.
Because we are grown-ups and respectful, aren't we, Ben?
We are,
Yes,
indeed.
and then I just kind of let it down in the middle. What can I say?
Don't you think it's a bit peculiar that we were both away at the same time?
Oh, yes. I also think it's a bit peculiar that you and I have almost come dressed as a carbon copy of each other. You can't see Joe's lower half, so take it from me. We're very colour coordinated tonight.
Ladybirds.
Yes, we look like ladybirds,
Beatles.
in case you're listening and you can't see what's going on. Glamorous ladybirds, I would add. Right, let's talk about Wales, shall we? It is scrapped, basically, not everyone, but pretty much most major road building projects in their country. Did you guess why? I asked you before the break. I said 2 words, one N, second one Z. Of course, this is all about net zero, protecting the environment and all that kind of stuff. Now, only projects that meet strict criteria will be passed. So, for example, not increasing carbon emissions or the overall number of cars on the road. As I was saying, Joe, some people are saying this is world-leading, it's really stunning and brave. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. I think this whole net zero thing has gone too far. I think pack it in, trying to dictate how people get around their own towns and cities. Go away and focus on something else. Thank you very much.
Well, I think it's a really good thing. And I think the first thing I would say is I think most people, if you went out and asked people on the streets of Doncaster or London or Liverpool or wherever and said, what does net zero mean? I think most people wouldn't have a clue. And I think that's part of the problem, that we fling it out. It's a little slogan that politicians use and councils say. I think this is really good. What the Welsh Government is saying is that they are imposing much higher environmental standards before new roads will be given the go-ahead. And they're scrapping 15, I think, of the ones that
15
are going ahead.
15 have gone ahead. The rest are going to be scrapped or they're going to be rejigged.
Yeah. So I think, if you look at the building that's going on, I can only speak for the southeast of England, but where you've got huge, great developments of housing, that invariably leads to more roads. Now, most of those houses that are being built will have at least 1, probably 2, possibly 3 cars. That means the roads are getting clogged up. So then you have daft councils, like the one that I am and have the misfortune to live under, that say, well, we'll build a bypass for the extra cars. Now, you will end up just clogging up. What you need to do is to look at a joined-up policy that looks at transport and building and development. You also need, as critics have said, if you're not going to build roads, you need to look at public transport and you need to provide options for people. But we can't go on just ploughing through the countryside and the environment willy-nilly without looking at the impact. Look what's happened with HS2, that isn't even going to deliver what it was promised in terms of speed, or railway stations, or journeys.
Or destination. It's going to stop short of where it was going
all
to end.
that damage that has been done, that is irreparable, has been done for no good reason.
It's been done for your reason of pushing people onto public transport. 2 seconds ago, you said you
nobody
wanted
wanted HS2 to go that way. What people wanted was east to west links.
What do you make, Ben Habib?
Well, I mean, just coming back on your planning policy point, boroughs right across the United Kingdom actually have restricted the number of car parking spaces you can have with housing, and they're increasingly pushing people towards public transport. But what I think is completely crazy about this policy, and so many ideologically driven policies that emanate from government, is that they are putting their ideology ahead of the economy. So they're saying, I don't know if either of you have driven in Wales. I have driven quite a lot in Wales.
I have.
The roads are appalling. The connectivity across Wales is appalling. If you want an economy to progress, you have to have interconnectivity. It's an absolute fundamental given. And this is not a transport policy. This is an anti-transport policy because it doesn't come alongside, I'm going to finish, it doesn't come alongside the development of public transport. Public transport also in Wales is shocking. So what they're doing is actually damaging the prospects of levelling up. They're going to make it more expensive for people to live in Wales, not more cost-effective, more difficult to get around, and all of that when we've already got the economy on its back foot with a cost of living crisis. Actually, one way to get something moving, I'm not a great fan of it, but one way to get an economy moving is to build roads, is to build national infrastructure, is to get better public services and so on. I'm not a great fan of it because I think we've done far too much government interference, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But the idea of banning the development of roads as part of an ideology for net zero without thinking of the consequences economically is just daft as brushes.
But Ben, surely you have to weigh up the consequences environmentally. And that, I mean, we are looking at the moment, you may well have discussed it on the programme, the pollution that is going into our rivers and into our seas.
But that's not the same as building roads where roads are needed.
It's about the environment, and you can, it's very easy to go, oh, net zero.
Well, no. I mean, the pollution, actually, I'm completely with you on the pollution.
Disgusting.
The water companies were privatised, shareholders have put dividends ahead of national infrastructure, and there are billions of gallons of water leaked and wasted.
You can't
all these droughts that we have, which, by the way, people blame on climate change, actually is very significantly as a result of water companies not doing the right thing.
It's also the result of people building on floodplains, and it's also the result...
But all of that, Joe, with respect, you're fighting battles that were won 30 years ago. We don't build in floodplains anymore.
Well, they do. Round Kent, they do.
Well, I mean, it's...
And they're even building
huge
places
restrictions.
where there's... But they're not, because they just...
Well, I'm a property developer. I can tell you it's very hard to build in a floodplain.
I will talk to you afterwards and give you the name of one where they have just said, oh, actually, it'll be fine. You can do a carbon offsetting thing. We'll allow
carbon offsets.
I mean,
carbon offsets.
But this is going into the water table.
Carbon offsets are one of the worst concepts ever.
It's ridiculous.
The notion that you can pay your way out. Either you cut back on your carbon emissions or you don't.
So why would you even have that in there as a policy that allows developers to go on, build in places where it's unsuitable, it is polluting, it is going to cause huge problems in the long term, and the answer is, oh, well, I tell you what, we'll give you some money for the raffle.
But you mentioned the long term. The fact of the matter is, and this is why lots of this doesn't wash with me, quite frankly, I do think a lot of this is more about control and trying to dictate to people how they can travel, which I don't appreciate. I think it's more about control than it is about climate, because road projects, etc., that kind of infrastructure is long-term infrastructure.
For the betterment of mankind,
Yes, but in the long term, my point is, if we're all to believe whatever, we're all going to be driving electric cars. So what is the pollution concerns there then?
But there's an absolutely perfect example of something that hasn't been thought through. Electric cars are still really expensive to buy. There are insufficient charging points all around the country.
But that's because we're at the start of the technology curve.
Yes, but if you're going to do something to encourage... I mean, to agree to a certain extent with what Ben said,
I agree with you.
You know, actually, if you're going to try and change people's behaviour, which, you might think nobody's got the right to do that, but if you want to get people off the roads, you absolutely have got to build or provide public transport that's affordable, accessible and realistic. So, of course, you don't do this, but I don't think there is anything wrong in saying we are going to bring in higher standards before
But Joe, this is a blanket policy against the building of roads.
No, it's not.
In a part of the United Kingdom which is notoriously bad for roads.
Ben, it's not a blanket policy. What they're saying is they are going to demand a much greater, much higher standards that should not cause more pollution. I mean, if you're building more roads, that presumably is because of the road...
by definition, just the embedded carbon in the creation of roads is
so if you
contributing to the problem.
If you take, does it take cars and vehicles out of small villages? Would they then become car-free? Would you then have, public transport hubs, for instance? There's got to be a quid pro quo, but I think to actually have a serious debate and say we need to be a bit more stringent and make our commitment to the environment mean something, then I think it's a good thing.
Well, of course, that is if you're in the camp that you really do truly believe that all of this is about the climate. You might be familiar, by the way, with the story of Wandsworth Council in London. They've just been in trouble because they started issuing their own fines, basically, to drivers. They had these 20-mile-an-hour zones. They started issuing all these fines. They've just been deemed as unlawful. Now, the DVLA has been told not to share the driver information with this council to proceed with these fines, because it wasn't their jurisdiction to be able to do this.
Great.
So, unfortunately, lots of this just does not wash with me, does it with you? Silly, says Christine, too much virtue signalling. Stopping road building is just not in the interest of the general public. Politicians, as usual, she says, being out of touch with their electorate. Roads and Wales. Totally agreed with the panel. Totally agreed with the council. Fantastic idea. Best thing ever. Anyway, he says, the best thing to come out of Wales is the A55. No new roads means increased congestion, which means more pollution, which is exactly what the government is apparently trying to avoid, says a smart man called Peter, who's watching at the moment. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, get this. There's a study being done, and apparently 38% of people agree with the following statement, that the world is controlled by a secretive elite. What's going on? Are you one of them? Why? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you at 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Ben Habib is the former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group. And Joe Phillips is the political commentator and former advisor to the Lib Dems. Christine says, Michelle, Why do you always say things that I agree with? I don't know. Maybe you're a smart woman as well, Christine. There are a few of us around the block these days, aren't they? Anyway, there's a new polling out that shows that 38% of the British population agree with the statement that the world is controlled by a secretive elite. This is research by the website Unheard, and it shows, get this, that people living in the poorest and most diverse areas of the country are most likely to agree with that statement. Are you one of them, Jo Phillips? Do you agree with that statement?
No, I don't. And when I first saw this, I thought, oh, this is just bonkers. This is conspiracy theorists and, you know, UFOs and everything else. But I think there is a much more serious issue underlying that, and underlying this, and I think it's about the disconnect between people and their ordinary lives and the authorities, if you like, that run their lives, and also the events that are beyond our control. So I think, you know, there is a real message here for politicians, and this survey is very interesting because it is not party political, it is across the board. But I think if you feel as though you've got no control over how you run your life, and I'm not talking about whether you can drive a car in Wales, but, you know, on the sort of the day-to-day things that you see, you know, you feel slightly overwhelmed by war in Ukraine, by a pandemic, by inflation, by stuff going on that you can't do anything about. I think it's not surprising that people, and, you know, social media is extremely dangerous and very toxic in many, many ways. And there's a very, very good and interesting in-depth investigation in one of the newspapers today about using AI and bots to feed false information and feed conspiracy theories. So all of that, I think, comes together into this revolting stew of making people feel scared and frightened. And I think, therefore, who do they blame? Somebody over there, somebody that they can't put a name to, they can't put a face to, and they're secret because they can't see them. And I think that should be a great concern to all politicians and everybody, whether they're parish councillors, MPs or presidents.
I've got some strong thoughts in response to you, but before I go off on one of my little rants, Ben Habib, your thoughts?
So, I mean, I think it's a very serious issue, and I think it's there's no smoke without fire. And the way I see this, I mean, there are multiple levels at which you can sort of opine on this problem. But fundamentally, what we've had in Western developed economies is 40 years of economic prosperity. And as we've had this economic prosperity, governments have actually moved from the principle of the individual having responsibility for themselves to governments being bigger, spending more money, controlling more aspects of our lives, making sure that, you know, the aversion to risk, for example, is massive nowadays in developed economies because we've been spoilt with all this economic wealth that we've built up over a 40-year period. And with that, with ever larger governments, and you've got it in the States, you've got it in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, right across Europe, in the United Kingdom, with that comes, with these larger states, comes the reduction in control that individuals have over their lives. And you do begin to see, rightly, I think, that the state is running things in a way with which you're not comfortable. And again, without wishing to go back on it in great detail, you know, lockdowns arguably was one of the most interfering, socialist, globally imposed government policies that anyone could ever point to. Never in history has large swathes of the globe simply been shut down in relation actually to a virus which ultimately proved not to be that dangerous. So I have great sympathy with people who think there is a conspiracy going on. In some respects, of course, they're right, even at a sort of smaller, more micro level, in that, you know, let's just take vaccines, for example. You know, there's a big debate over vaccines. Anyone who's not questioning vaccines needs their head examined. Normally, it takes 10 to 15 years to get a drug from concept to market. These vaccines were out within a year, and it's big money. And pharma make a lot of money. And when something as rapidly as that is brought to market and big money is involved, and we're now beginning to see, even with PPE, for example, money was being, you know, gone astray and so on, there are vested interests and there will be controls imposed, and people can be forgiven for thinking that there's some kind of conspiracy going on.
I do have to do, I do need to respond to that and say timeframes were shortened because a lot of money was invested and a lot of kind of...
Sure, but you have to ask the question.
Talking about control, Brian has been in touch. You made me smile, Brian. You said about the secretive elite trying to control us. Brian says, well, I am one of the said elite. I have complete control of my living room, except the remote control when my wife is in. Now, I found this conversation very interesting because I found... let me show you, actually, something that I listened to that I also found very interesting, which is linked, which is something that Keir Starmer said very recently. I think I've got a clip. Let me play it for you.
Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained, a tribal shouting place.
Now, Graham has been in touch. He says, it's not all that secretive, Michelle. This so-called elite, they meet at Davos. And yes, they do. And I found that clip there of Keir Starmer quite telling because it was a quick-fire question, quick, instinctive answer, if you will. His instinctive answer, Davos or Westminster, he chose Davos. And then kind of like laughed about it awkwardly and all the rest of it. I actually think that what has gone on globally has been pretty damn outrageous over these last few years. And we have tiptoed into a situation where way too many people have got a little bit power hungry. They must be rubbing their hands together with glee because, quite frankly, I bet they can't even believe that they've got away with half the stuff that they have got away with. And we are in a situation now where you will have heard the term the Great Reset, and people will talk about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and all the rest of it. And I actually don't think that what's going on is that secretive. I think a lot of it is actually playing out in front of people's lives and eyes. And when we talk about the Great Reset, you will also hear the phrase about a new normal. We will not be going back to our old way of living. We will be going to this new normal. And we talk about people feeling frightened and out of control of their lives. And I personally do not think that it is accidental. I think that has been orchestrated, created, and is very, very deliberate.
Well, I think there are many threads within that, and I think you only have to look at, and Ben alluded to it, you know, the PPE contracts, whether they were done in a hurry, whether they were done, you know, without due diligence. What we know is for sure that many people have made an enormous amount of money out of it, and most of those people were friends of people in government. What we see at the moment is the chairman of the BBC, appointed by a Prime Minister, for whom he arranged an introduction in order to secure a loan.
None of this passes the smell test.
None of it passes the smell test. And I think when people see that and they see themselves treated as, well, it doesn't matter to you, you're only little. Oh, you've got to go online, whether you know you're going to the bank or trying to get a doctor's appointment. We don't care whether you've got broadband. You've got to do it this way, my way, or the...
But there is a global aspect, absolutely. Keir Starmer, David Cameron, people like that, do not get their self-validation from the electorate in this country. The electorate are an inconvenience to getting into office. Once they're in office, they're much more comfortable rubbing shoulders with their international peer group in Davos.
One thing I would like to say, that Focal Data, who are part of, they're the other company that did this survey, also published a much more interesting survey about how people are turning away from national politics and turning back to local politics, which might make the May elections...
I've got to say, I do. I found this... you can read it yourself on Head. That is the website.
It's a huge subject.
It's very, very, very interesting. I think we've got to be very careful, you know, about how much control people think that they're suddenly entitled to over our lives. You talk about banks, by the way. It has not filled... it's not gone beyond me, my notice, about this whole kind of central bank digital currencies that people are very keen to be pushing these days. Try and spend cash anywhere these days as well, and you'll have quite a challenge on your hand. And you'll all remember the case during the lockdown, by the way, where some people had their bank accounts frozen, not in this country, I hasten to add.
Truckers in Canada.
It was the people that had donated to support the truckers in Canada. I mean, how
Yeah.
Dare you?
How sinister.
How dare you? And this is the problem. This is what I'm saying to you. You see these 15-minute cities where you're allowed to leave your area 100 times.
And net zero. If we, just briefly, you know, net zero, you need an external enemy to control people.
Well, exactly.
You make the climate your enemy. You've got a global enemy that you need to...
fear.
Well, I'm telling you, I've got to exert some control in this conversation because I have to go to a break. I'm going to go to a break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the fact that so many asylum seekers are disproportionately placed in the red wall. Why? You tell me. I'll see you in 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group, and Joe Phillips, the political commentator and former advisor to the Lib Dems. They're here, keeping me company in the studio. I could have carried on that previous debate for a whole other hour, but I might save that, and I've just been told by you don't. I'm not going to, don't worry. God, they don't trust me. Talk about control. Look at what I have to live with, everyone. Right, let's move on then, shall we? The Telegraph basically has done some analysis. It's saying that the burden of housing refugees and asylum seekers is falling more on red wall areas. Get this, everyone. About 7 times as many so-called asylum seekers per person are living in red wall areas than the south east. What do you make to this, Joe Phillips?
Well, I think it's obviously it's an imbalance. I mean, what's interesting is that many of these are Labour-controlled councils. So it's a so-called red wall. Labour-controlled councils which have been perhaps more welcoming to asylum seekers. The problem is, and I think we've discussed this millions of times before, it's about the backlog of people waiting for their asylum applications to be processed. So whereas people previously would go from, you know, a hostel or something like that into homes, because there is such a huge backlog of people, there's still 140,000 asylum applications. There's a shortage of council accommodation, so they are now going into hotels and for student accommodation, things like that. And that is causing tensions, as we saw in Knowsley over the weekend. So you've got people being housed in local hotels, and that's creating tension. What we need to do is to deal with the backlog so that people who have got a genuine case for asylum can work, pay tax.
But you can't just magic out of thin air or this whole kind of collection of people, when you've got this volume of people crossing every day pretty much.
You've had this volume, you've had Priti Patel, you've had Suella Braverman, you've had probably another Home Secretary in between.
But they've all seen the control of the illegal crossings of the Channel
But
through a prism of deportation.
And they haven't
And
done
they haven't
anything.
actually stopped them coming into the country.
No, and they haven't dealt with the people that are here.
Yeah. The 140,000, by the way, a lot of those may have arrived in this country legally. They may have, and then not left. But, you know, it's the ones that I think crossing the Channel that I think pose the biggest threat to the United Kingdom. And I use the word threat advisedly because these are people we do not know. We haven't checked their papers. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their values are. We don't know whether they're criminals, terrorists or whatever. Nigel Farage did a great expose a couple of weeks ago on his programme where he evidenced a link between Badri 313, which is the Afghani self-professed elite fighting force, and the promotion of people smuggling from France to the United Kingdom by Badri 313 and a group of young men in London making signs of Badri 313.
And we all know that criminality and criminal gangs
and so,
but that doesn't solve the problem.
But my view on anyone entering this country illegally has to be treated as a potential criminal and held absolutely.
What, somebody
you've
coming
entered
from Syria or Turkey
you've entered the country illegally. If
being
you've entered the
destroyed?
country legally and you apply for asylum, that's different. If you've applied for asylum in Iraq or Afghanistan and you've been given leave to come to the UK, that's different. But if you've entered the country illegally, we don't know who you are, we don't know what your values are, we don't know what sort of background you know, etc. You have to be treated extremely carefully.
Heard the Home Secretary being challenged on this very point at the Select Committee, the Home Affairs Select Committee, a few weeks ago by Tim Loughton, Conservative MP, who said, how would, and his example was a 16-year-old boy of unspecified...
It was a silly
it
question.
Wasn't, because she's the Home Secretary.
No, but
well, let's just, for the benefit of the audience who might not have heard it, he said, so I'm, you know, 16-year-old boy...
East African.
Whatever.
East African, yeah.
But, you know, I've got family here. How do I possibly... And she ended up saying the only way you could do this is to come illegally and then apply for
But the United
asylum.
Kingdom...
But we've got thousands, millions of people displaced because of the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. They haven't got any papers. They've got nothing.
But
are you saying that those people who might have got family here...
I'm black and white on this subject.
Hang on
Anyone
a minute.
entering the country illegally has to be treated with great suspicion and very carefully.
So, wait a minute, because I'm not having this. I'll tell you what's offensive, actually. You're now conflating these very, you know, poor, heartbreaking scenes in Turkey and Syria now with the predominantly Albanian people that are coming over from France in these dinghies. You know, anyone
coming
with
from
a heart,
France is
anyone with
already
a heart
safe.
would look at those scenes in Turkey and Syria and want to do everything. We're a hospitable nation. We would want to help genuine people in need. Chancers that are just coming to take the mickey out of the system, don't conflate the two, Joe, come on.
No, but Ben's saying anyone who comes here illegally.
Anyone who crosses that channel illegally.
There are some people who will come
Joe, they're
here
in France.
in desperation.
They're in France. They're already in France.
Well...
They must be treated. They broke the law to get here.
But we're talking about the people who are here now.
Very quickly, because I've only got a couple of seconds. Yeah. Do you think France is a dangerous place to be?
I don't think so, no. Not
OK, well, that's good. I shall leave it there. Then I think you've answered my question then, if you're in a safe country that is France. Let's have a look. Jennifer says, we in the Northwest are bombarded with refugees, and the worry is it's mostly young men who throw away their passports. Yes, they do. I hear you on that one. You know what? I don't think that this government is all that serious at all about fixing this issue. Do you? I'll leave you to ponder it overnight. That is all I have got time for. Thank you very much. Don't forget, March the 15th in Doncaster. Come and join us. Get your tickets online. Up next is Nigel Farage.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. There will be rain in the forecast over the next few days, turning particularly windy on Friday, but staying mild for the time of year throughout. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressures moving in from the Atlantic, giving the cloud and rain. This low pressure in particular will give some very strong winds across Scotland and northern England as we head through Friday, a Met Office warning already in force. Through the rest of Wednesday, we've got cloud and rain moving in from the Atlantic, and this turning quite murky and misty overnight into the early hours of Thursday morning. Clearer skies across Scotland here. A touch of frost is possible, 3 or 4 degrees in the towns and cities, close to freezing in the countryside. But elsewhere, with the cloud and rain, temperatures staying well above freezing. But that means a cloudy start across much of the UK to start Thursday morning. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle, tricky driving conditions over the higher ground with hill fog. Best of the sunshine, though, across northern Scotland. It stays sunny here for much of the day. Showers across Orkney and Shetland. Elsewhere, it slowly brightens up, and if we get any sunshine, we could see highs of 13 or 14 degrees, so well above the average around 8 degrees at this time of year. Into the evening time, further wet weather moves in from the Atlantic, spreading into Northern Ireland and Scotland, and then the winds start picking up during the early hours, combined with some heavy rain, could lead to some tricky travelling conditions for those up early into Friday morning. A Met Office warning coming in force from 5 o'clock. As a result, a lot of cloud around, the winds picking up here, 8 or 9 as a minimum temperature. Complete difference to what we've seen over the last few nights. So Met Office warning for gusts of 60 to 70, possibly 70